In this tutorial, we'll see what is application properties and what are all the uses of application properties, and how to inject values inside application properties to the Java beans and variables inside that. The second thing we'll see is how to inject values inside application properties directly into the Java variables. So a third thing we'll see is how to inject, instead of injecting each values inside application properties to the variables, to the Java variables, we'll create one separate bean. We'll add few variables inside that, and we'll directly inject list of values which is there in application properties to our Java bean variables. We'll see how to do that. The fourth thing we'll see profiling and what are the uses of profiling, how to do profiling and all. And the fifth thing we'll see is dynamic profiling. Let us go ahead and see each point in details how to do. Okay, application properties. When you create a Spring Boot project, it comes with application properties inside by default. So if you are using Spring Initializer or Spring Tool Suite, project comes with default application properties inside resources folder. We'll see how to do that. We'll go to Spring Tool Suite, new, other. I'll create Spring Starter project. So I name it as Spring Profiling Example. I'll just click on next. I'll just select Spring Web and Spring Boot Tools. If you're not familiar with this, please go through my previous video tutorials, and you'll see how to create a Spring Boot project and create a controller and a lot of things. Okay, I'll just click on finish. So this is a basic Spring Boot project, and as you can see, under the resources folder we have application properties. By default it has come, and there is nothing inside application properties, and it is under the resources folder because it is under the class path. Let's go ahead and create a new controller, home controller. Let's say REST controller as home controller, and I'll annotate it with @REST controller. We'll import this. And we'll create simple method, public string welcome. So simple message I'm giving back. I'll say @get mapping. Sorry. I'll say slash, and let us run this application. Go to run Spring Boot application. As you can see, is default port it started with 8080. Let us go ahead and see localhost 8080, which says welcome to my application. So the default port is 8080, and as you can see, default logging level is info. Let us go ahead and update our application properties to change the port. We can say server dot port is equal to, I'll say 8090. Currently it is running on 8080 port. We'll change the port to 8090. So as you can see, how simple is this? If you have to do it in Tomcat, you probably have to go to the config file and update the server port. Now it is in a single line, we can do it by updating the application properties. So what I'll do, now we have updated the server port, we'll also update the logging level. Okay, I can say is logging dot level dot org dot spring framework, logging dot level dot org dot spring framework is equal to, as of now it is info. I'll just change it to debug. Okay, so thanks to the dev tools, Spring Boot dev tools, we have enabled, if you remember, in the pom.xml. So basically what it does is, Spring Boot dev tools, what it does is, if you change anything in your application, it just restarts your server. We'll see that previous restart started with info. I mean to say the logging level was info, I'll just clear this, and now I'll save. So the moment I save it, restart the application. As you can see, our application now started with debug. There are a lot of debug logs you can see in the console.log. So there are a lot of debug things. So I can change this to trace directly. So what I'll do, I'll just clear this. I'll change to trace and click on save. The moment I hit the save, it restarts with the trace mode. Okay, so this is how you update the logging information and the server port in your application.properties. Let us go back to our slides and we'll see what is application properties. Basically, application properties are used to keep n number of properties in a single file to run the application in different environment. Consider you have a logging level of trace. Consider this is a development environment wherein you're going to deploy your application to the dev server. Then you can have trace here, and you can update the logging level to debug if you're deploying to production. I know it is not the ideal way, I'm just giving the example. You can update this to debug and deploy the application into the production environment, so that in the production you can have a debug logs, and in the dev environment you can have the trace. So basically that is what it says, to run the application in a different environment. So in the Spring Boot, the properties files are kept under the resources folder, which is basically under the class path. And the second thing we'll see is what are all the common properties you can add it to the application properties. So you can have a logging properties, data source properties. Your dev server is using MySQL database, so you can have that data source properties to connect to the MySQL database. And in the production you're using Oracle, the same way you can update your application properties to connect to the Oracle data source. So in different way you can add the properties of the data source, and caching properties, security properties, and actuator properties. I have not done any video on actuator properties yet, so it is one of the important thing to cover, so I'll be doing it soon. We'll see what is actuator and how it works and how to change the properties and everything and what it is. Okay, so now we are done with the server port and logging level. We'll see what are all the more values we can add it to the application properties and how to access those values inside our Java application, Java beans. Okay, next thing what we'll do, we'll create few custom properties in our application properties. Like I'll say my application.name is equal to Spring default profile example. So this I'll write. Another thing is my message. As you can see, I have added the key my application.name inside the another key my message. So we can use the keys in this manner as well. So consider you're saying my application name is equal to Spring default profile example, and you have used this my application.name in many places, like we have used in my.message. So when you come back later and you decided to change Spring default profile example to Spring profile example, then you have to change only in one place. Otherwise you have to change in all other places. So this is one of the advantages of application properties. And we'll create one more variable called user count and another variable called my.contact. And we'll go back to the code and we'll write this. We'll update the application properties with, I'll say my application dot name, and I'll say Spring Boot example, and the next thing we'll see is my dot welcome message, or I'll just say message as of now, is equal to welcome to my, I'll say dollar my application dot name application, and I'll say my dot user count is equal to 100, my dot contact info is equal to user at grave.java.in, something like that I'll do. And we have updated the application properties. Now we'll go back to slide. What to do next? We'll see what to do next. So once we are done with the application properties, to access these properties in our home controller or in any Java bean, what we have to do is we have to create a variables. Say I'll create variable like, what I'll do, I'll just change the view here so that we can easily understand. Probably I'll put it something like this, and I'll just move it like this. Just remove the Spring profiling so that we can easily see. So I'll have to inject my message to one variable here, and user count to one variable, and my contact info to one variable. I'll create three variable here: private string message, something like this, and private int user count, private string contact info. Now we have created our three variables. We'll see what to do next. So we have created three variables. One is message, and another is user count, and another is contact info. So basically, so how to inject the values which are there in application properties to the variables which we have created. So we have created a message string of type string, and you have to annotate with @ value, and you have to add this particular placeholder here. So when I say @ of value and the placeholder, what container will do is it will look for the my message, and the value of that my message in the application properties will be injected to this variable. In the same way we'll do for user count, and we'll say we can use it for contact. Okay, we'll go back to the code and we'll see how to do that. So I'll just mark it with @ value, just import this, and I'll say $. I'll just copy this my dot message from here to here. Same way I can do for user count, and also for, sorry, I forgot to copy this. Okay, here user count I'll say here, and contact info. As you can see, contact info and message both are string. It will be directly injected into the respective variables, but the user count is int. So basically what Spring container will do, it will take this user count 100, and it will check for the user count variable where we are injecting values to, and it will see what is the type of that user count. Currently it is int, so it will inject the value 100 to int. So what if the value is something else for the user count, something like some string is there? So in that case, what happens, while starting up the application itself, the container will throw the error. We'll see how it works. First we'll see, we have created three variables and we have injected values from application properties. We'll use that properties inside this. What I'll do, I'll say, basically what I'm doing is I'm returning these variable values to this get request, message, user content, contact info. Basically what we have to get now is, welcome to my Spring Boot example application, which is here, Spring Boot application example, user count is 100, and the contact info is user at grave.java.in. Okay, I'll just save this. So our application will restart. As you can see here, sorry, I'll just remove the trace. I'll just change it to info so that our console is not loaded up with values. Let's clear this. I'll save. So our application will start at 8090. We'll go back to the browser and we'll see 8090. When I hit enter, as you can see, the application properties values are directly injected to our variables. Welcome to my Spring Boot example application. This is what at my message, and user count is 100 and contact info is user at createjava.in. So now we have seen how to inject each value which are there in application properties to our variables. We'll see how to inject list of values which are there in application properties directly to the bean. Instead of mapping each values which are there in application properties to each variable, we'll create one bean and add these variables inside that bean and directly inject this application property value to that. To do that, we have special annotation called configuration properties. So we'll create one bean called my application bean, and we'll create 3 variables. We'll do that first. We'll go back here, we'll create class called my application bean, finish. So we'll create 3 variables. Before we do that, I had told you that if we change this 100 to something string, some string like that, it will throw error. Let's see, we'll say ABCD, something like that, and we'll save this. We'll just clear the console. When I save this, while restarting itself, the container will throw error saying error creating bean with the home controller, unsatisfied is dependency expressed through field user count. It says there is a type mismatch exception, so you cannot, this is kind of a string and you are trying to inject it to the integer. So this is how Spring application maps the values inside application properties to the respective variable types. Okay, I'll just change back to 100 and we have created our application bean, and I will see we'll create 3 variables: private string message, private int user count, private string contact info. So we'll have getters and setters so that we can display all these variables. Okay, now we have created our bean, so I can do this thing. I can have a @ value each of the variables and inject these values which are there in application properties directly to these variables. Again, it will not serve a purpose. So again, we are doing the same thing. Consider you have 50 variables and each of them you have to inject by using @ value. Instead of that, what we can do is we'll annotate this with @ configuration properties, and we'll mention what is the prefix. So I'll explain you what is it. So we have created my application bean with 3 variables. So we'll mark this as a component so that we can auto wire this in our home controller. We'll see that as well. So as you can see, this is our application properties. Each value key pair, each key is prefixed with my dot. Okay, as you can see here, my dot. What we can do is we can add this prefix in our @ configuration properties so that when the container sees which starts with my dot, that will be automatically injected to the bean variables. So what I mean to say is, consider we have my dot message, my dot user count, and my dot contact. Container says @ configuration properties, and you just fetch all those values which are there in application properties which starts with my. So basically what it does is my dot message will be injected to message, my dot user count will be injected to user count, and my dot contact will be injected to contact directly. So we'll see how it works now. Annotated with @ configuration properties to my application bean, and also have to @ component so that the Spring container will initialize these variables with application properties while starting up. Okay, now we are done with the application bean, and we'll go back to the home controller. We'll just comment these out as of now, and we'll create object of my application bean, my app bean, something like that. We'll auto wire this at auto wire so that Spring container will create an object for this and initialize the values from the application properties. So basically now my application bean is there, which is marked with @configuration properties with the prefix my. So it will look for the key pair values which starts with my, not this one because it won't start with my, and it will start with my, and it will look for the corresponding variables which are there. So what I'm basically saying is, if you change it to welcome message, it won't work, because if you change it to welcome message, then while starting up itself, it will throw an error saying that there is a type mismatch. Not exactly type mismatch, it says there is no corresponding variable present in this bean. If you want to change this value to welcome message, and you have to access here, if you want to access here, just mark it with @value and use it. As of now, I'm not going to do that, so I'll just save this. So what we have done here, we have error because we have commented this part out. What we can do, we can say, okay, now we are taking all the values from the bean. I don't think so there will be any difference in the front end. To make it difference, we'll change this to updated. Welcome message, I'll keep it as it is. I'll just change it to 200, and I'll just change it to updated user, something like this. Okay, just clear this. I will save this. So now everything is changed. We'll go back, we'll refresh. When I refresh, it says welcome to my updated Spring Boot example. This is what we have updated in our application properties to make sure that these values are injected into the bean, and we are using that bean to display the message. And the user count is 200, and the contact info is update data user at cravejava.in. Okay, so probably that's it for the application properties. There are a lot of things you can do with the application properties. As of now, these are all the basics thing